The grand chamber of the Aurelius diplomatic station unfurled before Nova Seraphine like a shimmering sea of prismatic light, alive with the soft hum of interstellar voices. Dignitaries from a dozen star systems filled the vast hall, their forms as varied as the cosmos itself, from the ethereal gossamer-winged sylphids to the crystalline quartzians, whose silicon bodies refracted the ceremonial glow into dazzling rainbows. At the heart of the spectacle stood the Nexus of Union, a platform of living metal that pulsed with the rhythm of galactic diplomacy, its surface gleaming like a beating heart. Nova's fingers trembled against her ceremonial gown, its bioluminescent threads designed to flare in harmony with Orlan physiology. But hers stubbornly dim flickered faintly where other nobles would have blazed like captured constellations, a dying ember amid radiant stars. Princess Nova Seraphine of the Orlan Empire. The herald's voice thundered through quantum amplifiers, reverberating with regal gravitas approaches to seal the alliance of hearts with Commander Ronan Cade of the Terran Unified Armada. Each step Nova took was a calculated defiance of the subtle limp. Her condition imposed a secret she buried beneath practiced grace. The neural augmentation ports behind her ears, a hallmark of her Ellen royalty, lay dormant, dark as extinguished stars. Her body's rejection of enhancement tech had branded her since childhood defective. On the dais, Ronan Cade stood resolute, his midnight blue dress uniform edged with silver that caught the light like a blade. His dark hair clipped to regulation curled rebelliously at the temples. When their eyes locked at Thorin, Nova braced for the familiar pity or disdain she'd endured from countless suitors. Instead, Ronan's emerald eyes sparked with something unexpected amusement, bright and unguarded. "Your Highness," he said, his Terran accent lending galactic standard a melodic lilt like a song half-remembered. He bowed, but not before she caught the fleeting quirk of his lips, a private jest in a public spectacle. "Commander," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm within. The herald motioned them to opposite sides of the bonding circlet, a ring of pure energy that hummed with latent power, waiting to bind their fates with spoken vows. Emperor Arjun's hologram flickered into existence beside the dais, his towering form clad in traditional Aurelian war armor, radiant even in projection. His presence dominated the chamber like a gravitational force. "We gathered to witness the union of empires," he declared, his voice a low rumble of unyielding authority. "This alliance shall bind the Orlan dynasty to Terra's territories, forging shared prosperity through resources, technology, and purpose. The terms are set, the contract sealed. Let the bonding begin." The herald raised a ceremonial tablet, its surface alive with scrolling legal text dense as a starfield. "Commander Cade, do you accept the terms, binding yourself to Princess Nova Seraphine and through her to the prosperity of our united civilizations?" This was the moment Nova knew too well. Ritual words, a mirrored vow, and the circlet's pulse sealing another transaction in the vast marketplace of interstellar power. Ronan stepped forward and her heart stuttered, expecting the inevitable. But instead, he raised a hand, casual, yet deliberate. "Actually," he said, his voice slicing through the solemn air like a plasma blade through velvet, "I'd like to revisit Section 47, Subsection 9, the part about voluntary compliance." The chamber fell silent, the hush broken only by the crystalline crash of a dropped glass, its shatter echoing like a gunshot. The herald's facial tentacles flushed a vivid purple indignation rippling through his form. "Commander, the terms have been rigorously vetted by both governments." And yet Ronan interrupted, pulling a data pad from his uniform with the nonchalance of someone checking a casual message. "This fascinating clause suggests both parties must actually agree to this union. Freely, willingly. Imagine that." His gaze met Nova's, those green eyes sharp with an intelligence that belied his playful tone. "So, Princess," he said, voice softening to a near-private murmur, "do you want to marry me?" The silence stretched taut as a tether in a vacuum. Every eye in the hall turned to her, their weight a tangible force. Emperor Arjun's hologram flickered with barely restrained fury, while syndicate of trade representatives leaned forward from their shadowed alcove, predatory anticipation in their postures. No one had ever asked Nova what she wanted. She began, then faltered, the scripted words of a lifetime dissolving. Her existence had been choreographed to hide her flaws, to shrink her into compliance. But Ronan's patient, mischievous expression urged her to cast the script aside. "I don't know," she admitted, her honesty raw and reckless. "We've never even talked." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Ignorance was not a virtue at state functions, nor was the notion that galactic alliances might hinge on something as frivolous as personal connection. Ronan's grin widened, transforming his face from striking to magnetic. Fair point, Princess. Herald, I move to invoke subsection 9 and request a recess so we can, what's the term, assess mutual compatibility through discourse. He glanced at his datapad with exaggerated seriousness as if consulting a sacred text. This is outrageous, the Herald sputtered, tentacles quivering. Outrageous is signing a lifelong contract without reading the fine print, Ronan shot back, his tone light but edged with steel. On Terra, we call that a lousy deal. He turned to Nova, his smile softening, meant for her alone. What do you say, Princess? A strange warmth bubbled in Nova's chest, unfamiliar, until she recognized it as laughter, real unpolished, not the delicate titters court demanded. It burst from her, a sound of surprise and delight, utterly wrong for the occasion's gravity. Coffee, she echoed, tasting the alien word. That bitter Terran drink that needs chemical wizardry to be palatable. Only if you're brewing it wrong, Ronan replied, undeterred. I know a spot on the commons sector. They do it right, complete with little cookies shaped like starships. Commander Kate Emperor Arjun's voice roared, shaking the chamber. You dare disrupt this sacred rite with your Terran nonsense. Ronan straightened the irreverent mask, giving way to the disciplined officer beneath. With respect, Your Majesty, I'm upholding your own laws. Unless, he let the word hang sharp as a blade's edge the Orlan Empire wishes to declare, before all that Princess Nova's consent is irrelevant. The trap was masterfully set. Nova watched her father's hologram flicker, his processors grappling with the diplomatic fallout of such an admission. An empire touting progress could not afford to dismiss her voice so publicly. The empire values every citizen's voice. Arjun ground out his words tight with fury, even those burdened by limitations. The familiar barb stung, but its edge was dulled, perhaps because Ronan had edged closer, not touching, but near enough for his warmth to anchor her, a quiet defiance the cameras wouldn't catch. Excellent, Ronan, said, his tone bright but cutting. Then no one will mind a brief pause while the princess and I explore this voluntary discourse. After all, a true alliance doesn't rely on rushed signatures, as if we're afraid someone might actually read the terms. He offered his arm, a gesture both courtly and subversive, daring the room to object. Your Highness, I believe you mentioned never tasting proper coffee. Nova studied his arm, the pulsing circlet the dignitaries thrown into disarray. Every lesson in decorum, every reminder of her worthlessness unless compliant, screamed at her to stay. But she placed her hand on his arm, feeling the steady warmth through his uniform. Lead the way, Commander, she said, and his answering grin lit something within her. As they moved toward the exit, chaos trailing in their wake, Ronan murmured, I haven't even asked what you do for fun. The word felt foreign, forbidden. Fun, she tested it cautiously. I collect ancient star charts, the ones from before quantum navigation when people had to read the skies themselves. Navigation by starlight, Ronan said, genuine awe in his voice. That's brilliant. The strange warmth in her chest stirred again. I tried celestial navigation once, he continued. Steered my training ship straight into a garbage scow. Laughter burst from her again, bright and unchecked like a solar flare. You crashed into refuse. Technically, I hit it with precision, he corrected, eyes twinkling. My instructor said he'd never seen anyone aim so perfectly for the wrong target. The sound of her laughter startled nearby dignitaries as if joy were a contagion. Behind them, the herald scrambled through legal texts, and syndicate representatives huddled in furious debate. Arjun's hologram had vanished, likely plotting her disinheritance or damage control. But none of it mattered. For the first time, Nova Seraphine was stepping away from expectation towards something undefined and thrilling. Fear should have paralyzed her, but with her hand on the arm of this irreverent Terran who turned her betrothal into a debate on consent, she felt free. So Ronan said as the ornate doors loomed these star charts. Got a favorite constellation? She hesitated. She'd never shared this with anyone. There's one from Terra's ancient seas, Cassiopeia, the vain queen doomed to spin eternally in the sky. Harsh punishment for a bit of vanity, Ronan mused. Perhaps, Nova said, glancing at him. But I always found it beautiful. Even in her punishment, she became eternal, guiding sailors home. Foolish, she added, half expecting judgment. Foolish, he echoed, his voice warm and slow. Finding beauty in hardship is the most human thing I can imagine, even if you're not human yourself. The doors sealed behind them, muffling the chaos. In the corridor's quiet, Nova's heartbeat thrummed quick and uncertain. "This is unprecedented," she said. "My father will probably try to court-martial me, censure me, or toss me out an airlock." Ronan grinned unfazed. "Maybe. But here's the thing, Princess, the Syndicate of Trade has been pushing this stellar trade pact for months. Marriage alliances are just the start." Nova stopped her breath, catching. "You know about the sentience credits?" His expression turned grave and the humor a shield for something fiercer. "Enough to worry. And I know marrying you won't stop them unless we're clever about it. So before we bind ourselves to this, let's figure out if we're fighting for the same thing." "And what's that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of his words. "The side that believes people, Orlin, Terran, or otherwise, are more than ledger entries." He paused, a spark returning to his eyes. "Also the side with good coffee. Priorities, you know." Nova studied him, this man who'd upended her world in mere minutes. His humor masked a core of steel, a conviction that echoed her own buried truths. "This coffee place," she said at last, "does it have private booths?" "We have much to discuss. Booths, killer pastries, and a proprietor who doesn't give a damn about imperial politics as long as you pay." Ronan replied, his grin back in full force. "Perfect spot to plot the downfall of the established order." "We're not plotting a downfall," Nova protested, but she was already moving, letting him guide her toward the common sector. "Of course not," he said, mock solemn. "We're just having coffee and asserting our right to consent. If that shakes up a corrupt system trying to commodify sentient life, well, that's just a happy accident." As they descended to the station's lower levels, away from the sterile grandeur of diplomatic halls, Nova felt centuries of duty lift from her shoulders, replaced by something lighter possibility. She remained the defective princess shackled by duty and bloodline. Yet for the first time, Nova Seraphine wasn't alone in questioning whether those chains were worth preserving. "Commander Cage," she said, her voice laced with formal habit. "Ronan," he corrected, his tone warm as a star's corona. "If we're reshaping galactic politics over coffee, first names seem fair, Ronan." She echoed, savoring the syllable's unfamiliar weight on her tongue. "What made you dig into subsection 9? He fell silent for a moment, his usual humor dimming like a star behind a nebula. When he spoke, his voice carried a raw edge. "Someone once told me the most dangerous contracts are the ones nobody expects you to read." And he glanced at her vulnerability flickering in those emerald eyes. "I saw your face as you walked that aisle. You looked like you were marching to your execution." "You thought to save me," Nova said, not accusing but probing her curiosity as genuine as the flutter in her chest. "I thought to give you a choice," he corrected gently. "Saving yourself, that's on you." They reached a turbo lift, its polished doors reflecting their unlikely pair, the defective princess and the maverick commander still clad in ceremonial finery, poised to vanish into the station's bustling anonymity. "My father will send guards," she warned, her voice low. "Probably," Ronan agreed, unperturbed. "But he's too cunning to make a scene dragging you back. He'll bide his time, scheme, try to spin this to his advantage." "You've thought this through," she noted, impressed. "I've been chewing on it since they briefed me on this marriage 3 months ago," he said, gesturing for her to enter the lift first as its doors hissed open. "What kind of alliance forces someone into it?" he continued, his voice steady, as the lift began its smooth descent, carrying them from rigid diplomatic protocols toward an uncharted frontier. "If we're facing the Syndicate, the Stellar Trade Pact, all of it, we need partners, not prisoners." Nova studied his profile, trying to reconcile the sharp strategist with the man who'd made her laugh about crashing into garbage. "You could have just refused the match," she pointed out. "I could have," he admitted, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But they'd have found another suitor. Someone who wouldn't care what you wanted." His tone lightened, mischief creeping back. "Besides, I was curious about the princess who collects ancient star charts and reads xenoarchaeology papers for fun. How did you—" She started, caught off guard. "I told you," he said, grinning. 3 months of prep. I did my homework." He caught her startled look and raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not in a creepy way, I swear. I just wanted to know who they were pairing me with. The official bio made you sound dull as stellar dust, but your library logs—" Those told a different story. Heat bloomed in Nova's cheeks, an embarrassingly Terran reaction. You hacked my library records. Hacked is a bit strong, he said, feigning offense. I creatively accessed the titles, not the content. Privacy matters even in arranged marriages. The lift slowed its hum, fading. But I have to ask theoretical applications of pre-warp navigation and quantum plotting. That's your idea of light reading. Despite the weight of the moment, Nova smiled. It had fascinating theories about instinctual navigation species evolving to sense stellar positions without conscious thought, like birds reading magnetic fields, but for space. Ronan's eyes sparked with genuine intrigue. That's actually the lift doors parted, cutting him off, revealing the commons sector, a vibrant chaos of colors, sounds, and scents that made Nova's sensitive Auralin senses flinch. Ronan noticed her hesitation. Too much, he asked softly. We can find somewhere quieter. No, she said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. I've spent my life in sterile, controlled spaces. It's time for a little chaos. He offered his arm again, and this time when she took it, it felt less like protocol and more like a tether to something real. Together they stepped into the crowded marketplace, two figures in formal attire weaving through vendors, hawking Terran apples and crystalline song spheres, their voices a lively cacophony. The coffee shop was exactly as Ronan had promised, small, cramped and indifferent to their grandeur. The proprietor, Mac, a grizzled Terran with more scars than hair, barely spared their finery a glance before jerking a thumb toward a corner booth. Usual, he grunted at Ronan. Two usuals, Mac, Ronan replied, and maybe some privacy. Mac's sharp eyes flicked to Nova, taking in her Auralin features and glowing gown with the weary assessment of someone who'd seen odder sights. Princess, huh? Long as she pays standard rates, I don't care if she's the Emperor himself. Herself, Nova corrected softly, her voice carrying a quiet dignity. And yes, standard rates are fine. Mac's lips twitched almost a smile. Good. Booth 3's got a dampening field. Not saying you need it for treasonous chats or anything. Perish the thought, Ronan said with a grin, guiding Nova to the booth. The dampening field hummed to life as they sat cocooning them in a pocket of silence. Nova's fingers traced the scarred table, marveling at the casual text. Such fields were reserved for top-secret councils in the palace. So Ronan said, settling across from her, his voice warm but probing, Princess Nova Seraphine, why's the daughter of Emperor Arjun really walking out on her own engagement? She met his gaze, seeing the intelligence behind his humor, the way he positioned himself to watch both her and the door, his shoulders subtly tense for trouble. Because she said slowly, I've read the Stellar Trade Pact's full text. I know what the Syndicate wants to legitimize a system that turns every sentient being into property. My marriage is just the first step, Ronan leaned back, genuine surprise flickering across his face. You know, she held his gaze unflinching. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Mac arrived, sliding 2 cups of dark aromatic coffee across the table, the mugs chipped from decades of use. Nova lifted hers, inhaling the complex scent, bitter yet layered with notes of chocolate and something like rain-soaked earth. First, Ronan said, raising his cup in a mock toast, we drink coffee and figure out if we can stand each other. Then if we're feeling bold, we save the galaxy. Just like that, she asked, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Well, there might be a few steps in between, he admitted. Overthrowing corrupt systems is hungry work. Mac makes killer sandwiches. Nova took her first sip of Terran coffee, bitter yes, but rich and challenging. Nothing like the palace's synthetic brews. It was perfect. All right, Ronan Cage, she said, setting her cup down with resolve. Tell me your plan. His grin was sharp as a star's edge. Thought you'd never ask. The dampening field flickered as Mac returned, sliding a data slate across the table with practiced ease. Your friend from the lower districts sent this, he said quietly. Said you were asking about shipping manifests. Nova watched Ronan's fingers dance across the slate, his expression darkening with each swipe, the easy humor vanishing, like a star behind a storm. What is it? She asked, dread coiling in her gut. The exchange registry, he said, turning the slate toward her. The Syndicate's been testing their system in the frontier colonies. Look, the screen displayed cold clinical data names, species origins, followed by credit ratings, debt tallies, contract statuses. Miranda Ken, human Titanus settlement. Nova read aloud, her voice tight. Debt for her daughter's medical treatment. Contract sold to Helion Mining Collective, bound for 7 solar cycles. She broke her leg in a mining accident, Ronan said, his voice low and grim. Couldn't work, couldn't pay for her kids' fever treatments, so she sold her labor to Helion. But read the fine print. Nova scrolled her stomach, twisting. The contract auto-renews if quotas aren't met, and they're impossible for a human to achieve. Ronan took the slate back, his jaw clenched. She'll never clear that debt. Neither will her daughter when it's passed down. This is slavery, Nova whispered, horrified. Worse, Ronan said, his laugh bitter as the coffee. Slavery was honest about its cruelty. This hides behind contracts and economics, turning bondage into a credit score. The familiar flutter in her chest, her doctor's defect, felt like her body screaming truth. How many, she asked. Thousands in the beta test, he said. When the stellar trade pact goes live, billions. Entire populations turned into tradable assets. My father knows, Nova said, not a question, but a certainty. He brokered the Orlan Empire's entry. Ronan confirmed, meeting her eyes. 30% fees on all contracts in Orlan space. Your dowry includes exchange credits. Our marriage would have sealed it. The coffee soured in her mouth. So your refusal just delayed their plans. They'll find another way. Unless we stop them, he said, leaning forward, his voice fierce. 2 people against the syndicate and my father's empire. Nova shook her head. Even if we expose this, who'll care? The powerful profit and the powerless. She gestured at the slate. They're already trapped. That's where you're wrong, Ronan said, his grin returning sharp and dangerous. We're not just 2 people. Mac, tell her about the Wednesday meetings. Mac, who'd been polishing the same bar spot for far too long, ambled over, his expression wary. Don't know what you're talking about. Mac's Wednesday meetings, Ronan pressed undeterred. The ones that definitely don't happen in the basement, that definitely doesn't exist. Mac glared at Ronan, then Nova, before sighing like a man resigned to fate. Every Wednesday, some folks gather. Talk labor theory, sentient rights, that kind of thing. Subversive philosophy, Ronan added with a wink. I call it progressive, Mac grumbled. Princess, you gonna snitch. Nova straightened, centuries of royal poise steadying her, despite her defective label. Do I look like I report philosophical debates to authorities? You look like you're wearing a dress worth more than my shop, Mac said. It's worthless, Nova admitted, surprising herself with her candor. The bioluminescent threads only glow for proper oral and physiology. On me, it's just fancy fabric pretending to matter like my whole existence. Mac studied her, then nodded. Wednesday midnight station at time. Knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. How delightfully clandestine, Nova murmured, a smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, well, some of us can't afford grand gestures in front of the diplomatic corps, Max said, almost smiling as he shuffled back to his bar. Ronan turned to her, his expression earnest. That's just one cell. There are others, colonies, core worlds, even inside the syndicate's heart. People who see what's coming and want to stop it. Rebels, Nova said. Lawyers, he corrected. Economists, data analysts, parents who don't want their kids inheriting debt. Workers who think their labor's worth more than a credit score. And yeah, a few rebels. We're a diverse bunch. Despite the weight of it all, Nova smiled. You're enjoying this, the conspiracy, the danger, the drama. Maybe a bit, he admitted, his grin boyish. But mostly I'm enjoying watching you realize you're not as alone as you thought. The dampening field flickered and Nova caught Mac's subtle hand signal trouble. Drink your coffee, Ronan said casually, his hand drifting toward the service weapon she'd noticed earlier. And tell me more about those star charts. She caught his cue, shifting to a relaxed posture. The Makari star mappers were fascinating, she said, her tone light. They charted emotional resonances alongside stellar positions. Emotional resonances, Ronan played along, though his eyes tracked movement beyond their booth. They believed space itself could hold feelings, joy near newborn stars, sorrow by dying giants. Their words flowed smoothly, a cover for the tension, as 2 gray-uniformed station security officers entered their scanners, sweeping the crowd. Sorrow by dying giants, Nova murmured. Taking another sip of coffee, the bitter warmth grounding her as she stole a peripheral glance. 2 figures in the gray uniforms of station security had entered, their movements too synchronized for a routine patrol. Sounds like poetry masquerading as science, or maybe science cloaked in poetry, Ronan said, his voice low but playful, keeping their cover. The Makari star mappers didn't care to split the difference. The officers wove through the coffee shop, their handheld scanners sweeping faces with methodical precision. They believed understanding the cosmos demanded both logic and love. Nova continued her tone light despite the tension coiling within her. A romantic notion for cartographers, Ronan mused, then raised his voice just enough to carry. Mac, those spaceship-shaped cookies you mentioned? What cookies? Mac called back, feigning ignorance with a practiced drawl. This is a respectable caffeine joint, not a bakery. One officer reached the booth beside their scanner, humming. Nova's heartbeat quickened, that familiar flutter, her doctor's defects surging like a warning beacon. But this time she didn't fight it. She turned, summoning the regal poise drilled into her since childhood. Officer, she said, her voice edged with imperial frost, is there a problem? The man froze, his scanner dipping as he registered her face. His partner approached, and Nova saw the flicker of recognition in their eyes. Your Highness, the first officer stammered. That is, His Majesty, requested? My father sent you to retrieve me, she cut in, her tone as cold as a comet's core, channeling centuries of Orlan authority. To ensure your safety, Highness, the officer said. The ceremony is in recess, pending contract clarification. Ronan interjected, his voice smooth as a polished blade, producing in his datapad with the casual menace of someone ready to drown them in bureaucracy. Subsection 9 of the binding accords if you'd like to review it. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions screaming above our pay grade. His Majesty's orders were clear, the second ventured hesitantly. The princess must return immediately. Of course, Nova said, rising with a grace that belied her racing pulse. I'll return after I finish reviewing my engagement terms, as is my right under Orlan and galactic law. Her voice rang with a power older than technology, forged from years studying her empire's laws as intently as ancient star charts. How long will this take? Highness, the first officer asked, his tone faltering. Nova glanced at Ronan, who was clearly suppressing a grin. Oh, several cycles, I'd wager, she said airily. The contract's quite intricate, especially the subclauses on resource allocation. She paused, letting the moment hang. You're welcome to wait. Mac, any seating for 2 officers? Full up, Mac said flatly. Try the noodle joint 3 levels down. Nice benches. The officers' faces fell, their expectations of dragging back a wayward princess shattered by this legal scholar in a coffee shop. Will report your status to His Majesty. The first said, resigned. But Highness, with respect, he won't be pleased. My father's pleasure has never been my priority. Nova replied, her voice icy but calm. His empire's legal standing, however, should be, unless he wants to publicly violate the accords he signed. The trap was as deft as Ronan's earlier gambit. Forcing her father's hand would expose the marriage as coercion, unraveling the Orlan Empire's progressive facade. The officers retreated, their steps heavy with defeat. Nova sank back into the booth, exhaustion crashing over her like a solar tide. That was magnificent, Ronan said softly, his eyes warm with admiration. Where'd that come from? Years watching my father twist laws to his will, she said, managing a faint smile. I may be defective, but I'm not stupid. Never thought you were, he said, his tone earnest. Those several cycles might have been ambitious. Your father won't wait that long. No, Nova agreed, her voice steadying, which means we need to move fast. This coalition you mentioned, how quickly can they mobilize? Depends on what you mean by mobilize, Ronan said, leaning back. We're not an army, Nova. We're accountants, dock workers, parents who read the fine print. Then we'll need to be clever, she said, pulling the data slate toward her, scrolling through the registry entries, each name a life ensnared in economic chains. The syndicate's power thrives on legitimacy, on making this seem like natural market evolution. So we make it absurd instead. Ronan's green eyes sharpened, studying her. You've got a plan. The Makari star mappers, she said, the idea crystallizing as she spoke, didn't just chart stars, they wove stories, made people see familiar skies anew. She met his gaze, a spark of excitement igniting. What if we did that with the Stellar Trade Pack show? It not as economics, but as theater go on, he urged, leaning closer. My father, the syndicate, they're banking on a solemn, serious transition. Legal jargon, formal rituals. A real smile broke through, sharp and daring. What if we gave them a circus instead? Mac, who drifted near enough to eavesdrop, grunted. You're talking mockery. Dangerous game with powers like that, not mockery. Nova corrected, her voice firm. translations stripping their dehumanizing language to show what it really means. She turned to Ronan. You said the coalition has data analysts. Some of the best, he said. They've been tracking syndicate moves for months. And you've got a knack for creative legal interpretation, she added. That's one way to put it, he said, grinning. Then we give them their precious transparency, she said, her voice alight with possibility. Every contract, every clause, every hidden fee laid bare so clearly no one can look away. The flutter in her chest surged, no longer a defect but wings unfurling. We turned their stellar trade pact into the galaxy's grandest joke. Ronan was silent for a moment, then reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, a question in the gesture. You know what you're proposing, he had said quietly. Your father won't just be angry, you'll be challenging the entire Orlin Empire. The empire that called me defective from birth, Nova said, placing her hand over his, feeling the warmth of his calloused skin reel in a way the palace never was. I've been defying it just by existing. Might as well do it right. Well then, Ronan said, his fingers gently curling around hers. We should meet the coalition. Fair warning, they're a weird bunch. Weirder than a princess plotting rebellion over coffee with the guy who derailed her engagement, she teased. Way weirder, he said, his grin infectious. Take Maya Taryn, our lawyer. She once filed a 30-page brief arguing gravity was illegally detaining her client. Nova blinked. How do you win a case against gravity? By proving the station's artificial gravity was miscalibrated, stressing her client's unique physiology, he said. But not before making the courtroom endure her philosophical rant. His thumb traced a small circle on her hand, a quiet intimacy that sent a shiver through her. She'll either adore you or recruit you to sue Entropy next. And the other, she asked, intrigued. Jex Orionis, he said, mime artist extraordinaire. Nova's eyes widened. The one who turned the Hegemony Council's treaty into a soup recipe. That's him, Ronan said. Doctorate in xenosociology, grudge against the syndicate. They bought his home station and turned his grandma's bakery into a protein dispenser. Oh, Nova said, a pang of sympathy tightening her chest. No wonder he made their treaty a soup recipe. Tasty soup too, I tried it. Ronan said, then grew serious. Then there's archivist Sael. Orlin like you but old school. Pre-Empire old. Impossible, Nova said. The Empire stood for as long as it claims, Ronan finished. But Sael remembers before. She's got archives that don't officially exist, laws that were never written. He squeezed her hand gently. She's the one who found subsection 9. Nova's mind raced in Orlin from before the Empire would be ancient, holding secrets her father couldn't fathom, suppressing. Why haven't I heard of her? She's good at staying forgotten, Ronan said. And your father would rather she didn't exist. She's keen to meet you, because I'm royal, because you're impossible, Mac interjected, abandoning all pretense of not listening. Orlin royalty not interfacing with enhancement tech should have died in the womb, no offense. You being alive and sharp means something. It means I'm defective, Nova said reflexively. Or, Ronan said softly, it means the system that labeled you defective is wrong. His words hung between them, heavy with possibility, stirring the flutter in her chest into something like hope. She thought of every humiliating medical exam, every pitying glance, every reminder she was a burden her father endured. What if they were wrong? What if her rejection of their tech was a strength? When do we meet them? She asked, her voice firm. Mac's Wednesday meeting is in 2 days, Ronan said, but Jex is on station in the creator's quarter. He glanced at Mac. He working? Jex never stops, Mac said. Kid's got caffeine for blood. Sounds healthy, Nova murmured. Says the princess who reads navigation theory for kicks. Ronan shot back, grinning. Come on, let's meet your first official rebel. His studios, an experience. They rose and Mac cleared his throat. Your Highness, the coffee. Nova reached for her credit pad, but he shook his head. Not the bill, though, that too. Did you like it? The Terran coffee. She considered it seriously. It was bitter complex, nothing like I expected. Kind of like today, she said, smiling. I loved it. Mac nodded, satisfied. Good. And Princess, when this all goes to hell, and it will remember old Mac served you honest coffee when you needed it. I'll remember, she promised. Outside the Commons sector's chaos felt less daunting, perhaps because Ronan's hand was still loosely entwined with hers, a quiet intimacy that would have scandalized the court but felt natural among the merchants and workers. So she said as they navigated the crowd, "This coalition, how do you wrangle a rebellion of lawyers and artists?" badly Ronan admitted with a laugh. "Our last meeting was a 3-hour fight over manifesto fonts. Maya swore serifs were authoritarian. Jex made the whole document animate when you tried to read it. And you," she asked, "I try to keep them focused on the goal, stopping the syndicate from turning people into property." "Noble 4, Commander," she said. "How'd you get mixed up in this?" His step faltered, his expression darkening. "Long story," he said. "Nova waited her patience, born not of powerlessness now, but of choice. My sister Sarah," he said at last, "born with a neural condition, nothing major, just needed regular treatments. But our colony was dirt poor, and the treatments weren't cheap." Nova's chest tightened, sensing the story's weight. "My parents took loans, medical credit, with reasonable terms," the agent said. "Just a slice of future earnings." His laugh was hollow. "By the time I understood, they owed more than they'd borrowed. Interest compounds." "What happened to them?" she asked softly. "I joined the military," he said. "Sent every credit home to keep them free." He shrugged, but the gesture carried years of strain. "Sarah still needs treatments. If the stellar trade pact goes through, if medical debt becomes automatic, she'll never be free." Nova finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "None of us will." They reached a lift to the creator's quarter, the air humming with possibility and peril. "So when they assigned me this marriage and I saw what it was really about, I couldn't just play along, even if you'd been willing." The lift filled with crystalline performers, their bodies chiming like soft bells. Nova and Ronan pressed closer, his warmth steadying her. She caught the scent of coffee on him, mixed with something sharper gun oil, a reminder of the weapon at his side. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I'm glad you refused, even if it's thrown my life into chaos." "Just wait till you meet Jex," he said, grinning. "Chaos is his art form, literally." The creator's quarter burst into view, a riot of color and sound that made the common sector seem tame, holographic sculptures twisting through the air like living dreams. Murals pulsed and shifted as passers-by moved through the creator's quarter, their colors dancing like living nebulae. Somewhere, a rhythmic performer pounded a rhythm on repurposed mining gear, the beat echoing like a heartbeat of defiance. "Jex's studio is just—" Ronan paused, his brow furrowing. "That's odd." Nova followed his gaze to a small crowd gathered outside a building, its walls flickering with protest messages. "Consciousness is not a commodity morphed into. Your debt is their wealth, then? Freedom, is that normal for him?" Nova asked, her voice low. "The message is yes," Ronan said, quickening his pace and pulling her along. "The crowd, no, but Jex thrives in obscurity, says popularity dilutes the art." As they neared, raised voices mingled with a high, bright laugh, manic teetering on the edge of genius or madness. And that a voice declared sharp and theatrical is why the syndicate's economic model is just poorly written, fan fiction of reality. They pushed through the crowd to find a young man perched on a floating platform, gesticulating wildly at a projection of economic charts reimagined as abstract art, swirling fractals of debt and despair. His hair was a chaotic blend of colors, perhaps intentional, perhaps the residue of paint mishaps. His clothes looked like a manifesto on fashion, and thermodynamics pieced together with reckless conviction. "Jex," Ronan called. "What are you doing?" The artist spun, nearly toppling from his soapbox, his face lighting up like a supernova when he saw them. "Ronan, perfect timing. I'm explaining why money's fake and math's evil." Want to join? His augmented eyes locked onto Nova with laser focus. "Oh, you brought the princess, the one who crashed the engagement ceremony. You're my new favorite person." Jex bounded down with surprising grace, parting the crowd like a comet through stardust. Up close, Nova saw his irises cycling through alien spectrums, a cobbled-together augmentation far from oral and tech. "Your Highness," he said, executing a bow so extravagant it was practically performance art. Jex Oriona's professional troublemaker and part-time prophet of informational chaos. "What you did today, making the Empire admit it doesn't care about consent. Subtle. Devastating. Art." His grin was infectious. "Want to help me dismantle capitalism with aesthetics?" Nova glanced at Ronan, who shrugged, his expression a mix of amusement and "I told you so." "I think," she said carefully, "we share goals, but maybe not methods." "Different methods are the best methods," Jex declared, ushering them through the crowd into his studio. "Come in, you'll love this, hate it, or both." Both is better. Nova stopped short inside. The space-defied logic walls shimmered in quantum uncertainty, the ceiling both present and absent, in screens on surfaces that might or might not exist displayed data streams transformed into visual poetry, each bite a brushstroke of rebellion. Welcome, Jex, said pride radiating from him to the vault of unresolved rebellions. Also my apartment. Also maybe a tiny tear in space-time, but the landlord's clueless. Jex Ronan said, his tone patient but firm. Why the crowd? You don't perform publicly. Jex's manic energy sharpened into something cunning. Funny thing, 2 hours ago someone leaked part of the exchange registry, just enough to wake people up. And somehow he grinned wickedly. My studio's address got tagged as a hub for artistic resistance. Weird, right? You leaked it. Nova said, not a question, but a certainty. Jex winked. I may have artistically reinterpreted it. He gestured to a screen where registry entries sang a visual symphony of debts, as notes, contracts, as rhythms building to a crescendo, both beautiful and harrowing. I call it slavery in B minor. Thoughts, I think, Nova said slowly. You're either a genius or completely insane. Jex spun to face them, his eyes cycling through unnameable hues. But seriously, Princess Ronan says you want to stop the Stellar Trade Pact. That true, yes, she said, feeling the familiar flutter in her chest, no longer a weakness, but wings poised for flight. Even if it means defying your father, your empire, everything you were raised to uphold. The question hung heavy, but Nova met his gaze. Especially then. Jex studied her, his augmented eyes shimmering through spectrums she couldn't name, then nodded satisfied. Good, because I've got something cooking away to make their whole system visible, every transaction, every contract, every hidden clause. But beautifully. You get it. He gestured at the screens. I can make data sing princess, but I need more than art. I need legitimacy. Authority. His grin returned sharp as a blade. I need a rogue princess with nothing to lose. I have everything to lose, Nova said quietly. Jex's expression turned deadly serious. No, you lost it all the day they called you defective. Now you're just deciding what to do with the freedom that comes after. His words struck her like a meteor, reframing her defect not as loss, but as liberation. No enhancement ports meant no digital leash. No integration meant no systems grip. She was broken in a way that made her gloriously free. What do you need? She asked, her voice steady. Access, Ronan answered for him. Jex can transform their totem, but we need the full registry, the contract algorithms, their expansion models. My military clearance gets me shipping logs and troop movements, but this is bigger syndicate core data locked in quantum encrypted vaults. He met her eyes. Vaults that need royal authority to open. My authority's compromised, Nova said. My father, your father, a new voice cut in from the doorway. Wei has less power than he believes. They turned to see a figure in legal robes that seemed to drink in the light, their dark folds absorbing rather than reflecting. The woman's features were sharp, sculpted by centuries of hard choices, her beauty austere, yet commanding. Her eyes, when she raised them, gleamed with the gold of ancient Aurelian bloodlines, flecked with something older primal. Maya Taryn, she said, extending a hand to Nova. Attorney at law, professional, thorn in the side, and collector of impossible causes. I hear you're shopping for a legal rebellion. Word travels fast. Ronan murmured, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Station gossip moves at near light speed when a princess ditches her engagement. Maya said, her smile sharp as a vibroblade. I've been digging into your father's authority. Your Highness? Fascinating stuff. Did you know the Aurelian Empire's succession laws have a curious clause about voluntary abdication? Nova's breath caught her mind reeling. My father hasn't abdicated, hasn't he? Maya said, her fingers dancing across a datapad with effortless grace. By signing on to the Stellar Trade Pact, turning Aurelian citizens into tradable credits, he's effectively abandoned his role as their protector. Subjects become assets, and a ruler without subjects is no ruler at all. Nova finished her thoughts racing like a starship at warp, but the legal precedent, murky, Maya said, her grin widening, and I thrive in murkiness, especially with a true heir to back me up. Tell me, Princess, ever thought about a hostile takeover of your own empire? The room seemed to tilt, or perhaps it was Jex's reality warping decor. Nova gripped Ronan's hand tighter, anchoring herself against the weight of possibility. I'm the defective daughter, she said. I have no claim. You have every claim, a new voice said, ancient and patient, carrying the weight of eons. The woman who entered made Maya seem youthful. She moved with the deliberate grace of someone who knew reality was fragile. Her simple robes, woven from shimmer weave, a fabric extinct since before the Orlan Empire's founding. Archivist Sael Ronan said, his tone laced with respect. Commander, Your Highness, Sael said, her nod slight but brimming with courtesy. Forgive my intrusion, but when impossible things stir, one must investigate. A broken engagement isn't impossible, Nova said, her voice trembling faintly. No, Sael replied, stepping closer, her eyes clouded with age but sharp as stellar crystals locking onto Nova's. But a princess who survives neural rejection, who walks, speaks, and thinks without the enhancements defining royal blood, that is impossible. Unless what? Nova asked, her heart racing, the flutter in her chest swelling into a storm. Unless the definition of royal blood was deliberately narrowed. Sael said, her smile like ancient stone cracking open. Unless someone ensured only certain heirs could claim the throne. Tell me, Your Highness, has anyone tested you for the old markers, those from before power was chained to machines? Nova's pulse thundered. The old markers were bred out. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what they're told, Sel countered, her fingers ghosting over Nova's hand. May I? Nova nodded, voiceless, as Sael's touch, cool and dry, sent a warmth spreading through her like a star igniting. The old woman's eyes grew distant. Oh, child, she breathed. You're not broken. You're pure. I don't understand, Nova said, her voice barely a whisper. The enhancement ports the neural integration. They're not evolution, Sael said, her grip tightening. They're control shackles dressed as upgrades. But you carry the original pattern in the template from before we traded freedom for the illusion of power. That's impossible, Nova said, the word hollow against the truth dawning within her. Is it? Jex interjected, bouncing forward, his usual mania tempered by conviction. Think about it. Every enhanced royal is wired to the system, their thoughts monitored, their choices nudged by algorithms. But you, his grin was electric. You're off the grid, princess, a ghost in their machine, which makes her dangerous. Maya added, her voice alight with legal glee. And fascinating. If Sael's right, and she usually is, you're not just an heir. You're the heir, the only one who can claim the throne free of system control. Nova pulled her hand free, stepping back, the weight of their expectations pressing like a planet's gravity. I don't want the throne, she said, her voice firm, despite the storm within. I just want to stop people from being turned into property. Admirable, Sael said softly, but perhaps those goals align. She's right, Ronan said, his voice quiet but steady, stepping beside her, not shielding but standing with her, a presence she felt in her bones. The Syndicate needs your father's cooperation to legitimize the pact in Aurelian space. But if the throne were contested, legal challenges would stall their treaties for cycles, Maya finished, her eyes gleaming. I could tie them up in courts forever. While we expose their true agenda, Jex added, his screens pulsing with data. Show everyone the truth they've buried in economic jargon, and build something better. Sael said, her voice soft as starlight. The old ways where power serves, not consumes. They all looked at her, Sael's ancient wisdom, Jex's manic brilliance, Maya's legal fire, and Ronan, whose green eyes held both a question and a promise. Nova thought of her father's sterile halls, a lifetime spent apologizing for her existence, of Miranda Ken's endless contract, of Sarah Cade's medicine chained to debt. The flutter in her chest was no longer a defect, it was a call to action. All right, Nova said softly, her voice steady despite the storm within. But we do this my way, no violence, no blood. We win by forcing them to choke on their own rules. Maya's eyes gleamed with approval, spoken like a true revolutionary. Or a true ruler, Sael added, her ancient voice carrying the weight of forgotten eras. Or both, Jex Orionis chimed in, his grin as bright as a supernova. Both is good. Ronan squeezed her hand, his smile a mix of pride and quiet awe, as if seeing her anew. So Nova, he said, dropping her title with deliberate warmth, ready to save the galaxy. Despite the fear, the uncertainty, the sheer audacity of their plan, Nova found herself smiling back, a spark igniting in her chest. Call me Nova, she said. Princesses follow rules, and we're about to shatter a few. Jex produced glasses from nowhere, pouring a vivid blue liquid that crackled with tiny lightning bolts. To breaking rules, he toasted in chains and maybe reality just a little. In a good way. They raised their glasses, this unlikely band of rebels and outcasts bound by bitter coffee and bold dreams. The drink burned down Nova's throat, tasting of ozone and endless possibilities. One question she said, wincing at the fiery aftertaste. How do we access the syndicate's data without getting caught? Jex's grin turned mischievous, his augmented eyes cycling through spectrums of chaos. Easy, we don't avoid getting caught. We make getting caught part of the show. Elaborate, Maya demanded, her tone sharp but intrigued. The Stellar Trade Pact announcement is in 3 days, Jex said, a galactic spectacle with every major player in attendance. His eyes gleamed with reckless genius. What if someone accidentally projects the entire exchange registry onto every screen in the station, right in the middle of Emperor Arjun's speech about the glorious future of commodified citizenship? That's not subtle, Ronan observed, his voice dry but amused. Subtle's for people who aren't fighting slavery, Jex shot back. But it only works if we get real access, the kind that needs a princess's biometric signature, Nova finished, her voice firm, which I can provide if we can get close enough. Maya was already scribbling notes on her datapad. I'll handle the legal cover, she said. We'll frame it as a transparency initiative. The syndicate loves preaching about open markets. Let's see how they handle open data. Sael's ancient eyes glinted with purpose. I'll provide historical context, old laws buried deep, stating information belongs to those it concerns. Dusty, forgotten, but still binding. And I'll ensure the coalition's ready, Ronan added. When this goes public, we'll need people in every sector to explain what it means to help those affected understand their options. Nova looked around Jex's impossible studio, its quantum-warped walls pulsing with defiance. These impossible people had chosen to fight for her impossible existence, and the flutter in her chest once, a defect, had hardened into determination. When do we start, she asked. Jex's grin was like a thoroughgoing Nova. Now, princess, we start now. Outside station security was surely hunting her Emperor Arjun, likely drafting threats and ultimatums, the syndicate scrambling to bypass her defiance. But here in this reality-bent sanctuary of law, art, and memory, Nova Seraphine felt something alien to her palace upbringing. She belonged. The coalition's headquarters, a repurposed water reclamation facility in the station's industrial sector, buzzed with chaotic purpose. Maya had claimed it through what she called aggressive zoning law interpretation, while Jex had turned it into a hybrid of command center and avant-garde installation. Data streams cascaded down walls like digital waterfalls, each torrent mapping a strand of the syndicate's web of control. Nova stood before the main display, watching registry entries scroll with cold, mechanical precision, names reduced to numbers, lives to ledger lines. 3 days of rebellion crash course had sharpened her resolve, but the weight of their mission pressed against her skull like a vice. Brooding again, Ronan appeared at her side, offering a cup of what Mac optimistically called coffee, its warmth steadying her trembling hands. That's your job, she teased, accepting the cup. I'm supposed to be the inspiring royal figure. You're not exactly inspiring, he said, his grin softening the words. Not when you're spending mornings learning to hack your own biometric signatures. First time for everything, she said, meeting his gaze in the display's blue glow. Want to know what's really eating at me? She almost deflected palace instincts, urging silence, but these past days had taught her the power of truth, especially with him. Sael showed me the archives yesterday, the real ones. Her voice tightened. The Aurelian Empire, my family's dynasty, it was built on the same system we're fighting. We sold enhancement tech to colonies for generational labor contracts. The only difference now is the prettier words. Ronan was silent, processing, his green eyes steady. So you're afraid we're not changing anything, just swapping one set of oppressors for another, aren't we? Her question came out sharper than intended, raw with doubt. If I claim the throne to stop the pact, how's that different from my father using his power to enable it? Because you're asking that question, he said, setting his coffee aside to take her hand in both of his touch warm and grounding. Your father never questioned his right to power, only how to hoard it. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palm. Power isn't evil, Nova. It's what you do when no one's watching, when cruelty has no consequences. That's what defines us. She wanted to believe him. These past days with the coalition had made her feel more alive, more useful than all her years at court. But doubt gnawed at her like a persistent ache. What if I become him? What if power corrupts? Then I'll call you out, Ronan said, cutting her off with a grin. Publicly, embarrassingly, maybe with interpretive dance. She laughed despite herself, the sound bright and unforced. Interpretive dance, I'm very expressive, he said, mock serious. Ask my unit. His expression softened. But really, you're not alone in this. That's the point. Your father built walls of systems that fed him lies. You've got us annoying, chaotic, and ready to tell you when you're being an idiot. Such sweet encouragement, she murmured, the knot in her chest loosening. Commander Princess Jex's voice cut through the facility sharp and gleeful. Stop flirting and come see this. I've done something either brilliant or catastrophic. With him, those aren't mutually exclusive, Ronan noted, but they were already moving. They found Jex amid a storm of holographic projections, his augmented eyes cycling rapidly as he manipulated data streams with frenetic precision. Maya stood nearby, her face torn between awe and dread. What did you do? Nova asked. Remember how we needed to broadcast the registry during the announcement? Jex gestured grandly at the central projection. I cracked it, the Syndicate's own broadcast system wired into every public screen for their big victory lap. You hacked it, Ronan guessed. Better, Jex said, his grin manic. I convinced their system our data is their data. A little mimetic virus, I've been tinkering with it, doesn't break their encryption. It makes their network think our message was always meant to go out. Maya rubbed her temples. That's either legally genius or will get us all spaced. Jex spun to Nova. Here's the catch, it needs real unforgeable authorization from someone with broadcast privileges. Like your father. Or his daughter, Nova said. The system doesn't care which royal's bloodline markers it reads. Jex pulled up a schematic. One touch from you at a connected terminal, and every screen on this station becomes our canvas. The announcement's tomorrow, Ronan pointed out. Security will be overwhelming, a new voice cut in. Admiral Theris stepped into view, her Terran Unified Armada uniform pristine despite the gritty setting. Nova tensed. Theris was neutral in the Empire Syndicate conflict, but neutrality often meant siding with the winner later. Admiral Nova said cautiously, this is unexpected. Everything this week has been... Theris replied, her expression unreadable as a starless void. A princess ditching her engagement, a commander citing subsection 9, a coalition of dissidents plotting to upend the economic order of 3-star systems. If you're here to stop us, Ronan began, his hand drifting toward his weapon. I'm here, Theris interrupted, because I've watched good soldiers become corporate pawns for 30 years. I've seen colonies stripped bare and told to be grateful. She paused, her eyes hard. And because your idealistic suicide mission needs a chance to work. Nova's surprise slipped through. You're offering to help. I'm offering to create security gaps for the announcement, Theris said, her smile sharp as a plasma blade. Tensions are high since the engagement stalled. It'd be prudent to reassign some personnel to less critical posts. That's treason, Maya said, grinning. I love it. It's strategic resource reallocation. Theris corrected, her tone dry. The paperwork will be impeccable. Before Nova could respond, alarms screamed through the facility, the digital waterfalls flashing crimson with warnings in a dozen languages. What's happening? She demanded. Sael appeared, moving with a speed that belied her ancient frame. The syndicates accelerated their timeline. They're holding an emergency session of the Stellar Trade Packet tonight, not tomorrow. Impossible, Maya protested. The legal framework requires they're calling it a security measure, Sael cut in, her voice grim, a response to terrorist threats against economic stability. Let me guess, Ronan said, his tone dark. We're the terrorists, not yet. Sael said, her eyes troubled. But there's been a riot on Helion Prime, a mining facility, where workers refuse their contracts. The syndicate's using it as justification. Nova felt the world tilt, their plans unraveling. The broadcasts weren't ready, the coalition wasn't in place, and she wasn't prepared. Breathe, Ronan murmured, his hand finding hers warm and steady. We adapt. It's what humans do best, right? I'm not human, she reminded him, her voice tight. Close enough, he said, turning to the others. How long do we have? 4 hours until the session convenes. Sael reported. The announcement follows immediately. Can we speed up our timeline? Nova asked Jex. The virus is ready. The data's compiled, he said. then faltered, realization dawning. Oh no, what she pressed. The terminals I can access remotely are low-priority info boards, entertainment screens. For the main broadcast system, the one reaching every major world, he gestured helplessly, you need to physically touch a primary node, and those are in the government sector, which will be crawling with security, Ronan concluded. Actually, Theris said slowly, her voice cutting through the panic, there's one that might not be. All eyes turned to her. The old communication center, she said. Decommissioned 3 years ago for quantum relays, but its hardware is still tied to the primary network. It's used for maintenance broadcasts now. Her smile was thin, calculating. And it's scheduled for a routine inspection tonight by me. That's convenient, Maya said, her tone laced with suspicion. Proper planning often looks convenient in hindsight, Theris replied, checking her timepiece. I can get a small group inside 2, maybe 3. More would draw eyes. I'm going, Nova said instantly, her voice firm. The biometric, I'm going with you, Ronan, interrupted his voice, firm, cutting through Nova's protest. No, she snapped sharper than she meant, her royal instincts flaring. If this fails, the coalition needs a leader who understands both military and civilian worlds. If this fails, none of that matters. He shot back his jaw, set in that stubborn line she'd come to recognize. I'm not letting you face danger alone. I won't be alone. I'll have Admiral Theris, a woman we've known for 5 minutes. He countered, his tone matching hers, unyielding. Nova, you want to talk about power and corruption? This is it, making decisions alone, cutting others out, because you think you know best. His words stung, piercing, because they were true. She was slipping into old patterns, the imperial assumption that her word was law. That's not, she began, but he cut her off, his voice softening but resolute. Fair neither is asking me to stay behind while you risk everything. Partners, remember, that means equal risks. This is touching. Jex Orionis broke in, his voice dripping with mock exasperation, but maybe save the relationship drama for after we stop galactic slavery. Just a thought. He was right. Nova's gaze swept the room, taking in these people who'd upended their lives for a principle, betting everything on a defective princess they'd known for mere days. All right, she said, her voice steadying. Ronan and I go with Admiral Theris, the rest of you. We'll make sure every screen projector and neural interface on this station is primed to broadcast the truth, Maya. Tyrian finished, her eyes gleaming with legal fervor. Don't worry, Nova, when you trigger that virus, the galaxy will be watching. And if something goes wrong? Nova asked, her voice low. Then we improvise, Sael said, her ancient calm, a stark contrast to the chaos. Revolution is art, not science. The best ones always have a touch of chaos. The next 2 hours were a frenzy of preparation. Jex fine-tuned his mimetic virus, adding what he called aesthetic flourishes that Nova suspected were designed to make the data's truth more visceral, more haunting. Maya drafted legal briefs to flood the station alongside the broadcast, translating the Stellar Trade Pact's jargon into plain, damning language for ordinary citizens. Sael coordinated with coalition members across the station, ensuring they were ready to guide and support those shaken by the revelations. Nova found herself in a quiet corner, nerves jangling, like loose wiring, the weight of their mission, not just exposing the syndicate, but dismantling the foundations of entire civilizations threatening to crush her. Second thoughts, Ronan appeared beside her, now clad in nondescript maintenance gear. Theris had provided his presence, steady as a star's gravity. Third and fourth, she admitted, her voice raw. This morning I was a princess. Tonight I might be a terrorist. Or a hero, he said, handing her a maintenance coverall, its rough fabric, a stark contrast to her ceremonial gown. History's fickle with labels. These should mask your biometrics from casual scans. Theris knows her stuff. Nova fingered the coarse material so far from the bioluminescent silk she'd worn days ago. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd gone through with the ceremony, if we'd played our parts? Every minute, he said quietly, his eyes holding hers. Then I think of Miranda Ken's family on Titanus and all the others trapped in those contracts. And I know we chose right, even if we fail, especially if we fail. At least we tried to be better than the system that forged us. He helped her into the coverall, his hands steady, brushing against hers with a warmth that anchored her. Besides, he added a grin, breaking through, you're not the type to play princess in a tower. I literally lived in a palace, she countered, reading xenoarchaeology papers and ancient star charts. Exactly, he said, his grin widening. Face it, Nova, you were always going to rebel. I just gave you an excuse. She wanted to argue, but he was right. Every book she'd read every night spent tracing stars older than empires. Every flutter in her chest that defied their mold, it had all led here. Ready, Admiral Theris announced from the doorway, her own appearance transformed by maintenance gear and artfully smudged grime. We have a narrow window. Nova glanced at Ronan, then at the team that had become more family in 3 days than her bloodkin ever had. Ready, she echoed. The journey to the old communications center was a masterclass in controlled terror. Theris led them through service corridors and maintenance shafts, bypassing the main thoroughfares where security had tripled. Nova kept her hood low, shadowing her distinctive Aurelian features. How do you know these passages? Ronan whispered as they crawled through a claustrophobic ventilation duct. 30 years of service teaches you the routes the brass never check. Theris replied, her voice low. Plus, I've been planning for something like this longer than you'd guess. They emerged in a storage bay beside the communication center. Through a small window, Nova glimpsed banks of outdated equipment, screens dark and waiting like sleeping giants. 2 guards, Theris reported. Standard rotation. They'll check this room in 10 minutes. Can you distract them? Ronan asked. Better, she said, producing a military comm unit. I can reassign them. They'll know it's a fake order, Nova protested. Eventually, Theris said, but guards follow orders first, question later, especially from an admiral. She keyed the comm. This is Admiral Theris. Initiate security drill 7-7 Alpha. All personnel report to Section 7 for immediate briefing. They waited, tension coiling as footsteps neared the door. Nova held her breath as the guards passed, their voices tinged with confusion, but driven by protocol. Go, Theris commanded. You've got 5 minutes before someone realizes the drill's unscheduled. They burst into the communications center, its equipment older than Nova expected. Physical interfaces, not neural links. Their tangibility grounding the moment. Ronan pointed to a terminal, its faint power indicators glowing. That's tied to the primary network. Nova approached, heart pounding, the act so small yet seismic. Just a touch, Jex had said. Her biometric signature and his virus would do the rest. Nova, Ronan said softly, his voice a lifeline. Whatever happens next, I want you to know. Don't she cut in her voice fierce. This isn't a goodbye. We're walking out together. Of course, he said, a grin breaking through. I was just going to say you look terrible in that coverall. Despite the stakes, she laughed, the sound bright and defiant. Romance is truly dead. Just making sure you're still you under all this destiny and revolution, he said. She placed her hand on the terminal, the surface cool under her palm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the screen flared to life, data cascading in patterns that seared the eyes. Jex's virus awakened by her touch. Biometric confirmed the system, intoned its voice like grinding steel. Authorization accepted. Beginning broadcast integration. That's it? Nova asked, disbelief tinging her voice. Seems too easy. The easy part's done, Theris said from the doorway. The hard part's getting out before alarms scream, not the standard alerts, but a primal wail as if the system itself were under siege. They know, Ronan said, his voice grim. Time to move. But as they turned, the main door exploded inward, not station security, but worse, syndicate enforcers in featureless black armor. Energy weapons humming with lethal charge. Princess Nova, their leader said, voice mechanically cold, by order of the Syndicate of Trade. You're under arrest for economic terrorism. Economic terrorism. Nova echoed, her voice sharp with defiance. Is that what we're calling truth now? Truth is what the market decrees, the enforcer replied. Surrender or your conspirators face harsher sentences. Ronan stepped forward, positioning himself between Nova and the weapons. Counteroffer, walk away, and we won't broadcast your contracts proving you're owned by shell companies. The enforcer's helmet tilted. You're bluffing. Check your wrist display. Jex's voice crackled through hidden speakers. Third line down, see the clause about performance obligations overriding personal autonomy. Congrats, your property too. Several enforcers glanced at their displays, their stances shifting as the truth sank in. The leader's weapon wavered. Lies, he said, but doubt crept into his mechanical tone. Truth, Nova said, stepping out from Ronan's shadow. The same truth about to flood every screen in 3 systems. The Syndicate didn't just plan to enslave colonies, they started with you. Even if true, the leader said our orders stand. Surrender or be subdued. The flutter in Nova's chest surged, no longer a defect, but the heartbeat of someone outside their system seeing its flaws clearly. I have a better idea, she said, and touched the terminal again. The effect was instantaneous. Every screen in the center, and she knew across the station, erupted with data, not just registry entries, but the syndicate's hidden machinery employment contracts, debt algorithms, the brutal calculus of oppression laid bare in Jex's vivid, haunting style. The enforcers' displays lit up, revealing their own contracts, debts, and managed lives. One gasped a raw human sound from behind the helmet. 90 seconds to full broadcast integration, the system announced. All primary nodes active. You've doomed us all, the lead enforcer said, his weapon lowering. Economic collapse. The only thing collapsing is the lie, Nova cut in. People will see what they're signing, what they're losing, what they've already lost. And they'll choose. Choose chaos, he demanded. Choose freedom. Ronan said, his voice steady. Messier than slavery, but worth it. The enforcers stood frozen, torn between duty and the truth blazing on their screens, euphemisms stripped away, revealing lives valued in credits, children's futures, pre-sold deaths, monetized. 30 seconds, the system reported. You have a choice, Nova told them. Follow orders from those who see you as assets, or help us build something better. Silence stretched, taut as a tether in vacuum. Then, with a motion that seemed to cost him everything, the lead enforcer powered down his weapon. My daughter, he said quietly, is in the medical debt registry. Since birth. We'll get her out. Nova promised. All of them. 10 seconds. More weapons deactivated. Not all, some enforcers remained rigid, locked in their programming, but enough. Enough to shift the tide. 5 seconds. Together, Ronan asked, offering his hand. Nova took it, his warmth anchoring her. Together. Full integration achieved. Broadcasting on all channels. Through the facility's windows, the station's night sky blazed with truth, every billboard, screen, and personal display alive with the reality behind the syndicate's rhetoric. In the distance, voices rose not in panic, but in anger, amplified by the station's acoustics. What now? Theris asked, her voice calm amid the storm. Nova glanced at the screens where Emperor Arjun's hologram flickered with rage. Syndicate executives scrambling to silence unstoppable feeds. The machinery of control ground to a halt against unfiltered truth. Now, she said, we go to the announcement chamber and offer them a choice. They'll never accept an enforcer began. They will, Nova said with quiet certainty, because the alternative is explaining to 3 systems why their lives were traded like commodity futures. She turned to the lead enforcer. Will you help us? He removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face and weary eyes. Name's Coleman, he said. And yes, for my daughter. For all of them. Others followed, helmets falling to reveal faces that could belong to anyone. That was the point. Nova realized the system thrived on anonymity, on interchangeability. But people with names, family stories, they were harder to trade. Right, Ronan said, slipping into military command with ease. Coleman, you know, government sector protocols. You're our guide. I'm an admiral in a crisis. Theris added, her smile sharp as a blade. I can access anywhere, especially with concerns about breaches in the announcement chamber. We're her inspection team, Nova said, feeling Ronan's hand squeeze hers, ready to finish what they'd begun. Her father, the syndicate executives, the lies they'd built, they were about to shatter. The flutter in her chest was now a steady rhythm. Not weak, just different. Let's go overthrow an empire, she said. Technically, we're saving it, Ronan corrected, as they moved, his grin, defiant. Semantics, she shot back, and they stepped into the fray. The best revolutions always are, Nova said, her voice a quiet fire as they left the communication center, the station erupting in a cascade of revelations. Behind them, screens blazed with Jex's unyielding truth, each pixel a testament to the syndicate's lies. Ahead lay the Stellar Trade Pact's announcement chamber, a confrontation decades in the making. For the first time, Nova Seraphine didn't face it alone. She had Ronan Cade, whose humor lit her darkness, allies who prized justice over profit, and a heartbeat that defied the Empire's mechanical rhythms. It wasn't much against the weight of empires. It was everything. The announcement chamber loomed like a cathedral to commerce, its towering walls lined with displays flashing economic metrics from 3-star systems. Now each screen burned with Jex's viral truth, transforming this temple of profit into a gallery of human suffering. Nova paused at the threshold, the moment's gravity pressing against her ribs like a collapsing star. Through the transparent walls, she saw hundreds of delegates, syndicate executives, and Emperor Arjun's towering hologram, all frozen in shock or rage as their carefully crafted realities shattered on every screen. Second thoughts, Ronan murmured beside her, his voice a steady anchor. Fourth, fifth, I've lost count. She admitted, watching her father's image gesticulate wildly, issuing silent commands to silence the feeds. He's going to destroy me for this. He was going to destroy you anyway, Coleman said quietly, the former enforcer's insider knowledge having opened doors that should have been barred. Just slower, Admiral Theris stepped forward, her bearings shifting from conspirator to commander. Follow my lead. We're a security inspection team addressing the broadcast anomaly. Stay calm, purposeful. You belong here. They moved as a unit, Theris's authority slicing through the chaos like a plasma blade. Guards who might have challenged them were distracted, their wrist displays scrolling with their own contracts terms that marked them as property pensions, leveraged, even death benefits pre-sold. Nova kept her head low, but she felt the chamber's atmosphere shift, confusion hardening into fury. Admiral Theris, Director Harmon, intercepted them, his pristine suit rumpled by panic. Thank the stars you're here. We need military intervention to stop this terrorist attack. I'm assessing the situation, Director Theris replied, her voice cool as a comet's core. Though I'm curious, how is displaying public contracts terrorism? Harmon's face flushed a violent purple. You know what? This is stolen data twisted to spark panic. When we find the culprits, you'll what? Nova stepped forward, letting her hood fall, revealing her face. Sell them into debt slavery. Oh wait, your contracts already do that. Recognition hit Harmon like a shockwave. Princess Nova, you're supposed to be detained, controlled, playing my role. She felt Ronan's steady presence at her shoulder, grounding her. I chose to read the fine print instead. The chamber's attention swung toward them like a tidal surge. Delegates pointed, security stirred, and Arjun's hologram pivoted with mechanical precision. Nova Seraphine, his voice boomed through quantum amplifiers. You dare show your face after this betrayal. I learned from the best father, she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. You taught me contracts are sacred. I'm just ensuring everyone knows what they're signing. You understand nothing. Arjun's hologram flickered with rage, its light fracturing. You're a broken, defective child who's humiliated this empire for the last time. Guards arrest her and her conspirators. But the guards hesitated, their wrist displays flashing with contracts that branded them as commodities, pensions, gambled lives pre-sold. Arrest her, Arjun commanded again. For what crime? Maya Taryn emerged from the crowd, her legal robes billowing like a storm front, her presence timed with surgical precision. Displaying public records. Enabling informed consent. I have 17 precedents proving transparency in contracts is not just legal but required. Enough, Harmon surged forward. This is economic sedition. Those contracts are proprietary. Those contracts are fraud. Nova cut in, her voice ringing, and everyone here knows it. The chamber erupted, delegates hurling accusations. Syndicate executives demanding order while screens relentlessly displayed the truth. Generational debts, medical care withheld, entire colonies reduced to corporate assets. Silence. The commands sliced through the chaos, not from Arjun or the syndicate, but from an unexpected voice. Senator Vallis of Terra's congressional authority stood at her delegation's post, her aged face hard as granite. I call for a formal tribunal on the Stellar Trade Pact and the contracts exposed tonight. You have no authority, Harmon snapped. I have the authority of a grandmother who just learned her granddaughter's education loan was bundled into a derivative that would have made her Helion Mining's property upon graduation, Vallis said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. That gives me standing. Other delegates rose their voices, joining Vallis's call for a tribunal. Not all, many stayed loyal to the system that enriched them, but enough to shift the tide. Nova felt the moment teeter on a knife's edge, the syndicate's careful calculus unraveling as people saw the equations. This is not how civilization works. Arjun's hologram loomed larger, as if scale could restore his dominion. Order must be maintained. The economy serves people, not the other way around, Nova said, stepping onto the speaker's platform, every eye tracking her like a star in orbit. You taught me power comes from control, Father, but true power, lasting power, comes from consent. You speak of things you don't understand. Arjun spat. You're defective, broken, unable to interface with the systems that sustain our civilization. Yes, Nova said simply, I am. And that defect let me see what those systems hide: enhancements, integrations, upgrades. They're just prettier chains. She gestured to the screen still blazing with data. This is our civilization. Debt farms, futures traded like grain, children born into contracts they never signed. It's efficient, and Harmon insisted, his composure fraying. The market allocates resources. The market allocates people. Coleman interrupted, stepping forward, his enforcer's armor, a stark contrast to his newfound resolve. I've enforced these contracts, seen families torn apart because someone got sick at the wrong time, watched children inherit debts no math could ever clear. We all have, and told ourselves it was necessary. It is necessary. Harmon's voice cracked. Without the pack, colonies collapse, trade halts, billions starve. Show them, Nova said quietly to Jex, knowing he was watching through the chamber's sensors. The screen shifted, no longer showing contracts, but alternative models, communities rejecting debt, thriving on trust and mutual aid. Small, struggling, but free. Nova Haven, she narrated as images flowed past, rejected syndicate membership 3 years ago. They were told they'd fail in months. They're thriving because when people aren't crushed by debt, they build. Propaganda. Harmon spat. Mathematics, Maya corrected, brandishing a datapad. I have the numbers. Productivity soars when workers own their labor. Innovation thrives when failure doesn't mean generational slavery. The syndicate's own buried studies prove it. How dare you? Harmon roared. How dare you? A new voice cut through, raw and fierce. A young woman in mining gear, no older than 16, had breached security, her presence a defiance of protocol. My mother is Miranda Ken. You don't know her, just entry, 4847 in your registry. 7 years of contracts because I broke my leg. Security moved to intercept, but Coleman and his fellow enforcers formed a barrier. Let her speak, Coleman said, his voice iron. The girl, Alara Costa, stood taller, her voice trembling but unyielding. You want to know what your efficiency looks like? My mother working 20-hour shifts, me quitting school for a junior contract to avoid default, knowing my kids will inherit our debt. That's your stellar trade pack families ground to dust for your pretty numbers. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of displays. Even Arjun's hologram seemed diminished, its light faltering. The motion for tribunal stands. Valus declared into the quiet. All in favor. Hands rose, not a majority, but more than the syndicate had anticipated their control, unraveling as people saw the truth. This is meaningless, Harmon said, his voice hollow. The contracts are signed. The pact is law in syndicate space. Sael's ancient voice drifted from the gallery, calm and cutting. That's where you're wrong. The archivist descended with deliberate grace, holding a document older than some planets. Orlin foundational law, pre-empire, never superseded. No contract shall bind beyond the willing soul. Poetic but legally binding, as are provisions in Terra's third covenant in the Crystal Concord Protocols. Her smile showed teeth. You built your system on unexamined foundations. They're crumbling now. Nova watched Arjun's hologram flicker, saw the moment he grasped the disaster, not just a rebellious daughter or a delayed marriage, but the unraveling of decades of control. Nova, he said, and for the first time she heard emotion in his voice, raw, almost human. You don't understand what you've done. Without the pact, without order, there'll be chaos. Yes, she agreed, and from chaos, choice. From choice, freedom. Freedom to starve, to fail, he countered. Freedom to be more than ledger entries, she said, stepping closer to his projection. You raised me to be a symbol father. Congratulations, I am one. You've become a terrorist, he said, his voice winter cold. I've become myself, she replied, the words like shedding armor she hadn't known she wore. The broken daughter who reads forbidden books. The defective princess who asks hard questions. The failed heir who chose love over duty. Ronan's hand slipped into hers, warm and real, grounding her. And that terrifies you more than any rebellion, because if I can choose, if I can reject the system that made me, so can everyone else. Arjun's hologram studied her, its light dimming. You are no daughter of mine, he said, the words icy and final. I know, Nova said softly. I never was just an investment that failed to mature. She turned to the chamber, her voice rising. The tribunal will convene, evidence will be heard, but the truth is already out. Every soul in 3 systems now knows their worth to you, their children's worth, their futures sold. And we offer an alternative, Ronan added, stepping beside her. Not chaos, but choice. Not efficiency, but dignity. The coalition stands ready to help build something better. Pretty words, Harmon sneered. But words don't run economies or feed billions. No, Nova agreed. People do, free people working for themselves, not servicing debts they never chose. She scanned the chamber, meeting eyes blazing with anger, fear, or the dangerous spark of hope, the kind that toppled empires. This is just the beginning, Ronan whispered in her ear. I know, she murmured back. Scared, terrified. You the same, he admitted, but also free. Free, she echoed the word, a quiet vow. A commotion erupted at the chamber's entrance, not security, but citizens, hundreds flooding in, drawn by the broadcasts and the promise of answers. Workers, traders, parents, children, all bearing the weight of contracts they now understood. Let them unveil us, commanded. If we're shaping their futures, they deserve to see it. And they came, a tide of voices and stories, no longer just numbers. Alara Costa, the young woman who'd spoken, pushed through to the platform, tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around Nova. Thank you, she whispered, her voice raw with gratitude for making them see us. Nova returned the embrace, her chest's familiar flutter swelling into a vibrant song of resolve. What's your name? She asked softly. Alara Costa. Well, Alara, Nova said, her voice warm. Want to help us build something better? Alara pulled back, her eyes fierce despite the tears. Yes, whatever it takes. Coleman stepped to their side, his enforcer's frame steady, but his expression softened. That's all any of us can do, whatever it takes to be more than numbers. The tribunal was taking shape, delegates splitting into factions, syndicate executives huddling in frantic damage control. Emperor Arjun's hologram flickered in a corner, diminished and irrelevant, a shadow of its former dominance. So Ronan said, surveying the controlled chaos with a commander's eye, we've lit the fuse. What now? Maya Taryn joined their circle, her legal robes a stark contrast to the turmoil. Now we make our case, she said, her voice sharp with purpose. Every contract, every algorithm, every hidden clause, we drag it all into the light. And then Nova asked, her gaze steady. Then Sael said softly, her ancient voice carrying the weight of forgotten truths, we remind them what civilization was meant to be before we decided people were products. Admiral Theris cleared her throat, her military bearing unyielding. The Armada needs clear direction. Many of our contracts are tied to the syndicate. If those are void, we'll figure it out, Nova said, her voice firm. Together, no more decisions made in sealed chambers by those who dodge the consequences. Speaking of consequences, Jex's voice crackled through a hijacked speaker, brimming with mischief. You've got about 3 minutes before Syndicate security tries to retake the chamber. Just a heads up, can you slow them down, Ronan asked. Already on it, Jex replied. It's amazing that what happens when their gear starts showing terms of service agreement as instead of targeting data. Won't last long, though. Nova looked at her allies gathered in this crucible of change. A week ago, she'd been alone in a palace, tracing dead stars, pretending knowledge could fill the void where purpose belonged. Now she stood at the heart of a revolution she hadn't planned, surrounded by people who believed in a better future. Ronan, she said, turning to him, remember when you asked if I wanted coffee to see if we'd get along? 3 days and a revolution ago? He said, his grin bright despite the chaos. I never answered, she said, her voice soft but clear. Despite the danger, the weight of world shifting, his smile widened. Well, I like you, she said simply. You make terrible jokes at the worst times, you've got no respect for authority, and you convince me I'm worth more than my defects. Because you are, he said, pulling her closer, his warmth a shield against the storm. Also, you didn't mention my devastating good looks. I was getting there, she teased. Security's literally at the door. Coleman interrupted, his voice dry but urgent. Then we better hurry, Nova said, and kissed Ronan in full view of the chamber, the broadcasts in 3 systems. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. Her father's empire was crumbling. Armed forces were breaching their position, and billions' fates hung in the balance. But it was chosen freely, fully unbound by contracts or conditions. That made it perfect. As they parted, the chamber doors groaned under assault metal buckling. But fear gave way to clarity, sharp as a star's edge. Ladies and gentlemen, Nova announced, her voice carrying to every corner, the old world is dying. Help us build the new one. As security forces breached the chamber, citizens and delegates, scattering or standing firm, the centuries-old order shattered like ice in a spring thaw. Nova Seraphine, broken princess, defective daughter, unlikely revolutionary, realized the universe's greatest power wasn't control credits or even love. It was choice, and she'd made hers. The real work was just beginning. Syndicate enforcers poured through the breached doors like a black tide, but their advance faltered, half of them staring at the displays where Jex's virus had turned targeting protocols into stark visuals of their pension funds traded as derivatives. Formation Gamma, their captain shouted, but his voice broke as his visor showed his daughter's medical debt compounding in real time. Coleman stepped forward, hands raised, but stance unyielding. Look at your screen. Really look. I have orders, the Captain Morrison replied, but his resolve wavered. From who? Coleman pressed. Executives who pre-sold your death benefits, corporations that own your genetic material. He tore off his helmet, tossing it aside. We both know what those orders are worth now. The chamber churned with controlled chaos. Some delegates fled, others stood firm, many frozen as their ordered world unraveled on every screen. Ronan's hand in hers anchored Nova through the storm of change. The tribunal will convene, Senator Vallis's voice cut through steady with authority. Security forces will stand down or violate interstellar law. What law? Director Harmon demanded, his voice shrill. This is terrorism. This is transparency. Maya interjected, her voice projecting, without amplification, sharp as a vibroblade. Article 7 of the Galactic Trade Codex demands all contract terms be disclosed to affected parties. We're just ensuring compliance. Through theft, through chaos, Harmon spat. Through truth, Nova said, stepping forward, despite Ronan's instinct to shield her. The truth you've hidden behind algorithms and jargon. More citizens flooded in security, unable or unwilling to stop them, their faces etched with desperation. People who'd just learned their lives were collateral in someone else's portfolio. Order Arjun's hologram flared larger, grasping at authority through sheer presence. Clear the chamber, restore the systems. This madness ends now. You're right, Father, Nova said calmly. It ends now, but not as you think. She turned to Sael, who waited with ancient patience. The archives you mentioned, the pre-Empire laws. Show them. Sael smiled, producing a stack of documents, their age older than some planets, her gnarled hands spreading them across the podium with surprising grace. The Arlen succession codes, the originals, not the palace's edited lies. She cut off Arjun's protest with a teacher's stern tone. Before neural enhancements, before integration, mandates, before power was chained to tech. She looked at Nova. Tell them what you felt when we tested you the old way. Nova recalled that moment in Jex's studio, Sael's cool touch igniting warmth, like a homecoming to a place she'd never known. It was like coming home to somewhere I'd never been, she said. The pure bloodline, Sael declared, not pure in your father's eugenic sense, but in the original meaning, untainted by artificial controls free to choose. Meaningless, Arjun spat. Power flows through the enhancement network. Without it, Sael finished, she's the only true heir, uncontrolled by your systems. The founders knew what happens when rulers become puppets of their own tech. The implications rippled through the chamber. Harmon's face paling. Even if true, it doesn't matter. The syndicate's contracts are binding. We're binding, Maya corrected, her smile predatory. Contracts signed under false pretenses are void, hiding that people's futures were commodities. That's textbook fraud. You'll collapse entire economies, Harmon protested. We'll free entire populations, Nova countered. Yes, it'll be messy, difficult, but the alternative is accepting that human dignity has a price tag. Everything has a price tag, Harmon insisted. That's how civilization works. That's how your civilization works, Ronan said, his voice steady. We're building a different one. A young enforcer barely out of training powered down her weapon. My brother's in the registry, 8 years old, already owing 3 years' labor because of our mother's pregnancy complications. Enforcer Patali, stand down, Captain Morrison ordered, but his heart wasn't in it. No, sir, she said, removing her helmet, tears streaking her face. I won't arrest people for showing me the truth. One by one, more enforcers followed. Not all, some stayed rigid, bound by programming or loyalty, but enough to shift the power. This is what revolution looks like, Nova whispered to Ronan. Not armies clashing, but people choosing. Beautiful, he murmured back, terrifying, but beautiful. Enough, Arjun's hologram flared with fury. If the enforcers won't act, I'll initiate palace guard protocols. Your guards are reading their own contracts right now. Jex's voice cut in cheerfully. Did you know you leased them from a syndicate subsidiary? They were finding that fascinating. And I've grounded all military vessels pending contract review, Theris added calmly. Can't have ships flying when we don't know who owns them. The enormity of their actions crystallized, not just exposing the system, but paralyzing it, every enforcement mechanism undone by people discovering they were as owned as those they controlled. The tribunal convenes now, Valus declared. Princess Nova as the wrong party in the marriage contract. Sparking this crisis, you speak first. Nova surveyed the chamber, confused enforcers, panicking executives, desperate citizens, her father's impotent hologram. She squeezed Ronan's hand once and stepped fully onto the platform. 3 days ago, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. I was ready to sign my life away, not because I wanted to, but because I'd been told my defects made me worthless, good only as a bargaining chip. My inability to interface with our tech made me broken. She paused, meeting eyes across the chamber. I believed them. Even as I read of other ways to live, other measures of worth, I thought something in me was fundamentally wrong. Then Commander Cade asked me one question. Did I consent? Ronan's smile at the memory bolstered her. That question changed everything. Once I asked it about marriage, I had to ask it about everything else. Did colonists consent to their debts? Did workers consent to their contracts? Did any of us consent to a system turning our lives into investment opportunities? The system ensures stability, a delegate shouted. It ensures control. Nova corrected, her voice cutting through. Stability for those at the top, built on everyone else's backs. But I'm not here to argue economics. I'm here to tell you what's next. She drew a breath, the flutter in her chest now a powerful surge. The Stellar Trade Pact is dead. Its contracts are void. Its debts are forgiven. The chamber erupted, executives screaming impossibilities, citizens weeping with relief, delegates demanding order. Through it all, Nova stood serene in the storm's eye, her voice a beacon of calm amidst the chaos. By what authority? Director Harmon demanded, his voice a low growl as the chamber's clamor subsided. By mine, Nova said simply, her words ringing with quiet power. As the last free heir of the Orlan Empire standing outside your system's grasp, seeing its flaws clearly. As someone who chooses to wield what power I have to restore choice to others. You can't just, Harmon sputtered. I can, I have. It's done. She turned to the chamber, her gaze sweeping the crowd. This isn't the end of commerce, trade, or civilization. It's the end of treating people as commodities. The coalition stands ready to build new systems, ones rooted in dignity, not debt, choice, not control. Harmon's voice dropped dangerously soft. And if we refuse, then you explain to billions of newly freed people why you want to re-enslave them. Nova said, her tone unwavering. I suspect that won't go well for you. This is naive idealism, Harmon snapped. This is overdue justice, Sile interjected, her ancient voice cutting through like a blade of starlight. And it's been coming longer than you know. Nova isn't the first to carry the free bloodline. She's just the first in generations with the courage to wield it. The weight of Sile's words settled over Nova, a revelation of others labeled defective, discarded to preserve the system. How many free heirs had been silenced, erased to uphold this lie? There's more, Sile continued, her voice carrying effortlessly. Something the Syndicate and Emperor don't want you to know. The enhancement network, the integration systems, they're not just control mechanisms. They're decay. What do you mean? Senator Valus asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. Each generation integrated deeper, enhanced more thoroughly. Sile said, her sad smile a crack in ancient stone. And each lost something: creativity, adaptability, the spark to think beyond program limits. You called Nova defective, but she embodies what we were before we traded our potential for the illusion of perfection. Lies. Arjun's voice rasped, but doubt threaded through his hologram's flicker. Truth, Sile countered. Why has innovation stalled? Why do colonies struggle despite your efficiency? You've built a civilization of biological machines optimized for obedience, not growth. Nova's mind raced, recalling the patterns in her books. civilizations rising and falling undone by rigidity, masquerading as strength. So what now? A voice called from the crowd, a shop owner from the commons sector, her tone half hope, half dread. You say we're free, but freedom doesn't buy food, fuel, or medicine. No, it doesn't. Nova agreed, her voice steady. That's why the transition matters as much as the declaration. Maya Taryn stepped forward, datapad in hand, her eyes gleaming with purpose. We've drafted the Covenant of Freedom core principles for rebuilding: no generational debt, no contracts on life's necessities, no ownership of persons by any name, labor valued, fairly resources shared equitably. Pretty words, Harmon sneered. Practical policies. Maya cut in, her voice sharp as a vibroblade. We're not dismantling commerce, we're ending slavery with extra steps. And the coalition will help. Ronan added, standing beside Nova, his presence a steady anchor. We have economists, engineers, administrators, people who understand systems, but remember they serve humans, not the other way around. It'll take time, Nova said, her voice clear and resolute. There'll be difficulties, mistakes. But we'll face them as free people making choices, not assets being managed. Captain Morrison stepped forward, helmet discarded, his weathered face scarred and tired. My daughter's in the registry. If the debts are forgiven, she's free, Nova said gently. They all are. Morrison's composure cracked a relief breaking through. Then you have my support and my apologies for... He gestured at the breached doors. You were doing your job as you understood it, Nova said. Now you can do it as you choose. More enforcers stepped forward, abandoning posts to join the swelling crowd of citizens, the lines between controller and controlled dissolving like mist in sunlight. This changes nothing. Harmon's voice rose to near hysteria. The syndicate has resources, influence. The syndicate has contracts. Coleman interrupted, his voice steady. Contracts now worthless. Your corporations, subsidiaries, your whole network, it relies on people honoring agreements they no longer recognize. We'll sue, demand enforcement, Harmon spat. From whom? Maya asked, her tone deceptively pleasant. The courts you've packed with own judges, the enforcers you've enslaved, the Armada Admiral Theris has grounded. Face it, Director, your power was borrowed, the loan's been called. Nova watched Harmon's face cycle through denial, rage, and crushing realization. His empire of contracts was only as strong as people's willingness to uphold them. Without legitimacy, without force, it was just numbers on screens. Father Nova said, turning to Arjun's diminished hologram, it's over. The empire you built, the control you cherished, it's done. Fight it, and you'll be remembered as the emperor who clung to slavery. Or help us build something better. You are no daughter of mine, he repeated, but the words lacked their earlier venom, hollow as a dying star. I know, Nova said, her voice soft with sorrow. I never was just an investment that failed to mature. But I am the Orlan heir, and I choose to use that legacy to free, not control. The tribunal recognizes Princess Nova Seraphine as the legitimate heir to the Orlan throne under pre-Empire law. Valus announced, her voice formal but resolute. Furthermore, it validates the voidance of all contracts under the Stellar Trade Pact's false pretenses. I don't want a throne, Nova said quickly. I want a council, representatives from all affected peoples, decisions made openly together. No more rulers, only public servants. That's not how empires work, Harmon said, his voice faint. Then we won't have an empire, Nova replied simply. We'll have something better. The chamber transformed around them, rigid hierarchies giving way to organic alliances, citizens and ex-enforcers, delegates, and workers grappling with a world suddenly vast with possibility. There's so much to do, someone said, voice torn between despair and wonder. Yes, Nova agreed, but for the first time, we choose what that is. Jex's face appeared on a screen, grinning manically. Hey, Princess, the virus is system-wide now. Every syndicate database is doing interpretive dance with its secrets. Very educational. Nova laughed despite everything. Is that necessary? Not at all, he said, but revolutions need style, don't you think? Admiral Theris brought focus back. The immediate issue is maintaining order in the transition. People need food medicine services. The coalition will coordinate, Ronan said, his voice firm. Not control, coordinate. Local communities know their needs better than any bureaucrat. I can help, Morrison offered. The former enforcement units know the infrastructure. We'll keep essential services running while new systems form. And the legal framework will ensure fairness, Maya added. No more hiding exploitation behind complexity. The archives will be opened, Ayel promised, her voice soft but resolute. All of them let people see their true history, not the edited lies that justified their chains. Nova felt the moment solidify potential, forging into purpose. She looked at Ronan, his smile blending pride, affection, and something deeper, still unnamed. Together she asked the word, carrying more than its sound. Always, he replied, understanding completely. She turned to the chamber facing the wreckage of the old world and the foundations of the new. Let's begin. What followed was messy arguments, confusion, flashes of near violence as the truth sank in. But there was also hope, raw and painful yet radiant. People discovering they owned themselves, families realizing their children were free workers, understanding their labor's worth beyond debt. Hours later, in a quiet corner, Nova stood with Ronan, the station's lights gleaming through the windows, less rigid, more alive. So he said, we just toppled multiple governments, crashed the galaxy's biggest economic system, and maybe kicked off a new era. How do you feel? She considered the flutter in her chest now. A steady strength, not a weakness. Free, she said, terrified, exhausted, overwhelmed, but free. Good, he said, pulling her close, his warmth a shield against the chaos. Because I've got another question. The last one started all this. This one's simpler, he said, his grin softening to something tender. Want to get married? Nova blinked. Now? After everything, not now, he said, laughing. Someday when we're not dismantling systems of oppression. But I want to choose you, Nova Seraphine, not for treaties, bloodlines, or politics, but because you're brilliant, brave, and you laugh at my terrible jokes. They are terrible, she said, tears pricking her eyes. The worst. So when the galaxy's less on fire, will you make an honest rebel of me? Yes, she said, and kissed him as the old world crumbled and the new began to rise, their embrace a quiet defiance against the fading empire. But not in that hall, agreed, he said. Mac's coffee shop, perfect. They stood together, watching citizens and ex-enforcers work side by side, Maya drafting new laws, Sael sharing ancient stories, Theris coordinating resources with military precision and civilian heart. Oh, Jex's voice crackled through a nearby speaker. Almost forgot about your father being a puppet. Check the sub-basements. Just saying, Nova frowned. What's he mean? One way to find out. Ronan said, his tone light but curious. But that was a mystery for another day. For now, there was too much to do. Too many people to help, too many choices to make. For the first time, Nova Seraphine had too much freedom to chase conspiracies. She was too busy helping others find theirs. The Orlan Empire had fallen. The Syndicate broken, the Stellar Trade Pact dead. The future was unwritten, terrifying, and radiant. Somewhere in the crowd, laughter broke out, not bitter or mocking, but pure, uncontained joy, spreading like wildfire, the sound of people rediscovering they were more than numbers. Revolution, Nova thought, sounded like laughter. It was a glorious beginning.